Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and welcome to another episode of The Naked Gun. This is a video series where I choose a weapon, I use absolutely no attachments, hence the Naked Gun title, and then I let you guys know why I liked or why I disliked the weapon with its bare bone essentials. And for today, I'm going to be switching things up a bit. You may not have noticed, but I've never done a Naked Gun episode with the support weapons. I find them to be a little frustrating. I think that they're highly dependent on their attachments, and overall, every time I tried to make an episode with a support weapon, I rage quit. I don't like to rage quit, I'm not proud of it, but this is one of the things that just wasn't all that fun. But today I decided to buckle down and try to provide you guys with some fun gameplay. I kind of had to have the mindset that I was just going to have fun, I wasn't going to go all super serious or anything, and overall I had fun. And the weapon I'm going to be reviewing for today is the M60. It's a fun weapon. I did have some pretty rage-inducing moments with this weapon, so I will go more into the details as to why I like it, but there are a fair amount of reasons why I dislike it. So if you're not aware, the M60 is one of those weapons that has the highest damage model out of all the guns in Battlefield 3. It is going to do 34 damage up close, and that's going to drop off to 22 damage at long range, and that's probably one of the nicest things about this weapon. If you compare it to pretty much any of the assault rifles and their damage model, they do 25 damage up close, and so that's only a 3-point difference from the highest damage of the assault rifles and the lowest damage of the M60. So it's doing pretty well in that department. Where it starts to run into some problems, though, is when you look at its recoil numbers. I believe it has the third highest vertical recoil out of all of the weapons in the game. Don't quote me exactly on the placement, I could be wrong, but it's still fairly significant. And when you try to hold down the trigger and go for a medium to long range engagement, it's going to be a very challenging endeavor just to keep your crosshairs over your target. I found that really the only way to take out someone at those distances was to actually tap fire and burst fire, because surprisingly the M60 has one of the lowest initial recoils out of all the weapons in the game. This weapon kind of has a lot of the best or the worst aspects of a gun, which I guess kind of makes it balanced. But anyways, getting back to my point, its initial recoil is quite low, so when you do go for those engagements, it makes it a lot easier to manage the recoil, and it's really going to be the only way you're going to be able to take out those targets. Of course, when a target is up close and personal, you're still going to want to hold down the trigger and try to spray them down, but really going for a long to medium range shot, it's going to be almost impossible to kill them if you try to just hold down the trigger for more than a couple of seconds. And I know that's true for pretty much any weapon out there, but it's more so for the M60. Not only that, and something I had to get used to, which is kind of unique to the light machine guns, is when you hold down the trigger for more than a couple of seconds, when you let go, the weapon is going to plummet down to the ground. And if you have multiple enemies in front of you, and you took out the first target, but you held down the trigger for a while, it's going to slam to the ground, and you're going to have to reassess and get your weapon back to the next target, which can be kind of difficult if you're used to only playing with the engineer or the assault rifles, which really don't have this problem. So another way that I got around this is that when I would go for an enemy, I held down the trigger for a while and I saw another one round the corner. Instead of stopping my fire, either I would just keep holding down the trigger, or I would zoom out and then zoom back in, so I wouldn't have to worry about that huge clunk where the weapon just falls to the ground and then you have to bring it back up to try to take out that next target. It's something it's definitely very unique for the light machine guns, and if you haven't experienced it yet, it's going to be quite a surprise when it actually happens to you, and you're going to get killed by it more often than not, and it definitely happened to me quite frequently. The M60 also has a very long reload time. It is going to take you 7.2 seconds for you to get back into the action, and if you do run out of ammunition, which does take a while, without extended mags you do have 100 rounds in your magazine, but once you go through all of those, make sure you find a corner to hide in, because if you do come across an enemy, be very ready to pull out your pistol, because you're never going to be able to go through that entire animation like you could with, let's say, the M16E4. It's going to take you a very long long time to go through the reload, and your pistol is going to be your friend in those engagements. Another poor aspect of this weapon is that it does have a very slow rounds per minute. It has an RPM of 580, and while I did say earlier it does pack a punch up close, it's going to do 34 damage a shot. Every single one of those shots you have to make count, because if you go against someone who's using, let's say, the AEK, who has a very fast RPM, or let's say the FAMAS, if they miss one shot, it's not really going to make all that much of a difference, because they're going to have like 5 bullets flying in right behind them. But if you miss with one shot with the M60, one more shot could mean the difference between life and death, just because the RPM is so much slower. And so it can be a challenge to even win any engagement up close and personal, just because you're at such a huge advantage. Not only that, but because this weapon has a lot of bullet spread, I didn't really mention this, the belt-fed light machine guns just have a lot of bullet spread. They have a lot of recoil, and that can make it very difficult for you to even line up those shots at medium to close range. So I just find that it's not a very strong weapon up close, just for the sheer fact, even though it does do a lot of damage, trying to make sure that every single one of your shots counts can be a very challenging thing to do. So with all that being said, if I still haven't deterred you from trying out the M60, then I would highly recommend playing it in the medium game, because you're going to have to make every single one of your bullets count when you're up close and personal. It can be a very frustrating experience to just try to be all Rambo and play like you're using, you know, a very high RPM weapon. If you feel like you're up to the challenge and you think that you're a very accurate shot, then more power to you. I should also mention that it has a terrible hipfire accuracy. I kind of forgot to mention this. So if you think that you're going to be able to spray people down, you know, with its hipfire accuracy, with the high magazine size, then you're in for a huge disappointment. It really does suck. The hipfire accuracy on this thing is abysmal. As for its long-range killing potential, because it does have such a large vertical recoil, it can be difficult to take out those targets. So really, I think the sweet spot for the light machine gun is to go for the medium range game. I got the most success when I went for those types of targets, you know, but make sure you're still burst firing, but you're going to get, you know, it's going to be very accurate for those engagements. You're not going to feel like every single one of your bullets are missing, and you're also not going to be at as large of a disadvantage as if you were going up close and personal against a, you know, a FAMAS. As for its attachments, you get a couple of options. I would recommend using something like the Cobra Sight or the ACOG scope for the first slot. Really, it's going to come down to personal preference and really whichever one you're most comfortable with. But for the second slot, I would really just use the bipod. You don't have to use the bipod. I know a lot of people out there just hate that attachment, but really the bipod on the light machine guns is going to make them so much more powerful and a lot more accurate. When I was just using the naked gun for this weapon, you know, it's quite painful to get some footage, but when I actually started to use the weapon correctly and use it with a bipod, I was able to lock down quarters. I was able to kill people at long range, which you really can't do without the bipod deployed, and overall the weapon just becomes a lot more powerful. I would not use the foregrip because the weapon doesn't really have a whole lot of horizontal recoil. It's just going to hurt the weapon pretty much. It's not really going to provide any benefit and just hurt it in pretty much every engagement. As for the final slot, I would say you have two options here. If you want to be a little bit more mobile, you don't want to be bogged down by the bipod, then I would recommend using something like the flash suppressor. It's going to reduce your vertical recoil quite significantly, and that's going to make it a lot easier to stay on target, which is always a good thing. As for the second recommendation, I would go with the extended mags. I think it is a perfect complement for the bipod. If you really just want to lock down a corridor like on Operation Metro, then this is going to make it a lot easier. Because the weapon does have such a crazy long reload time, you're not going to have to reload as often, which is always a good thing. And really, you just cannot go wrong with having more rounds in your magazine. So those are the two final attachments I would use for that slot. But that's it for today's Naked Gun. I hope you enjoyed. But before I go, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about this weapon. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you think it's the worst thing ever? I'm kind of on the side of where I think it's fun to use and it does have its moments, but I would much rather use something that's a little bit more reliable like the M16 or the L86 or just something that has a higher RPM, but that's just my opinion. But if you guys enjoyed today's video or just want to support my channel, I would always appreciate it when you give my videos a rating, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more. But until next time, guys, have a good one and take it easy.